Okay, we should be okay. We are live on YouTube. That happened, everyone, hello. Sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as just hitting the button, but right now it did. So, uh, Gordana, hello, and happy Sunday Live. Happy Sunday Live.
Hi, Lucas, and hi, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday Live today. Thank you for joining us. We
Yes.
love you. It's great to be back here and feel your energy out there. We're going to explore the empowering topic of setting boundaries.
Mm.
This is a big one for me, and it's a big one for Lucas too. So I'm excited to see where we'll go with this one today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a needed topic. It seems like
Yes.
I know, I know I need it. Was thinking, I've said this probably on a live before, and I wrote this post as I explored. Like, I have all these books on boundaries that I read when 2016, when I really had this breaking out of the trauma loops and all the family dynamics and all the pain that I had experienced. And I realized I always look at wordplay left and right. So reading the word backwards and forwards and see if there's some hidden code in the word. And I realized that the word no and on are inverted words. And I
Yes.
wrote that whatever we don't say no to is left on by default.
Mhm.
So if we
Mhm.
don't have, and I had up until, and even I don't know if I fully have it embodied as much as I want to say no,
Mm.
it leaves other people's desire on in this field that I want to protect and preserve. And
Mhm.
so just articulating the word no sets
Mhm.
this boundary so in an energetic field to keep us safe. But anyway, I'm glad we're
Mhm.
talking about this today because I know a lot of people need the support as much as we do.
Yes, the thing with saying no is that there's a question that pops up in your head. For me, it's this silent voice that says, "Yes, but can I say no and still be a loving person? Because
Mm,
it's important for me to be perceived as the loving human being that I am." Now, that puts me in a situation where I try to control the other, and I can't, which will disempower me every single time. So, of course, you can be a loving person and say no. It's a
mm,
question of how you say no. You don't have to be angry when you say no. It doesn't have to come from a place of fear, anger, resentment, or whatever it is. It can come from a place of self care and say, I can't do this because whatever it is that I need to do for myself. And when I practice this, I can see I can see if a person is connected to their own boundaries, if they have accepted themselves fully or not. Because the people that accept my no accept themselves. The people that don't accept my
mm.
no, they are the ones trying to control outer reality.
Yeah.
And they don't know where the boundaries are. So it becomes almost simple because you can see the difference here. And there is no fear in saying no if you do it lovingly and gently in a way that, or when it comes from a place within you that is joy based instead of fear based.
Mm.
So when it
Yeah.
comes from a good place in you and you say, you know what, I can't say, I can't stay for dinner because I have to, wake up early in the morning. I have a meeting or something like that. Gently say no instead of staying there and then feeling angry at yourself because you lost time in the evening. Just being very, very honest and saying why, so that the person you say no to doesn't have to speculate, ruminate, think, just being very direct and very honest. And you can still be a loving person and say no.
Right.
Now, that has taken me a long time to practice and learn how to say. And I still find myself not being able to say no all times. Sometimes I don't because I'm afraid that people will see me as something else than what I truly am.
Mm. And that's a hard thing sometimes to
Yeah.
sit with. Yeah, as we were
Yes.
talking about before we went
Yes.
live, it, so in 2016, I had this, um, that's when I had the flashbacks and I started really looking at my life and
Mhm.
childhood and all the pain
Mhm.
that I had been carrying. And I had this realization, and it was reflected back to me by my mother-in-law, actually, who's a therapist. And she said that I equate standing up for myself with hurting other people because the only person that I saw growing up that stood up for himself hurt me and hurt everyone around it. And I was like,
Yes.
God, that's a fascinating. Well, I mean, the psyche is so interesting how it can
Mhm.
correlate and then interpret our own identity in contrast to those that we see do similar actions.
Mhm.
And it's taken me a long, long time to even get comfortable being comfortable with being uncomfortable in disappointing the
Others.
potential of other people. Yes.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's the disappointment that feels frightening and
Yes.
scary.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, I always say disappointment is like missing an appointment. You can't meet the other person soul to soul.
Mm,
So that would be missing an appointment soul to soul. That leaves you disappointed
good.
if
Yes.
we are playing with words.
Yes. Which is the best. Yes.
Yeah, so if you, but you have to be honest with yourself and your needs and your desires and your wants, because otherwise it will be a disappointment. If you're
Mm,
not honest with yourself, then you're not, your answers, your no comes from a place where it's not soul connected. And
right.
that's why it turns out to be a disappointment. If you can't say no to a person who wants to stay to dinner and you have to wake up early in the morning and you stay and then you have a day of hell because you're tired and
Mm,
you will feel resentment towards that person. And that's all wrong because that person didn't say you have to stay. It's all on you. You have to be the one taking responsibility for your own well being.
yes.
And
Yeah.
that's really hard when you've been in an abusive relationship with someone, be it parents or spouse or whatever it is. It's
Right.
really, really hard to know how to do this without ending up with disappointment. Either someone is disappointed at you or you're disappointed and feel resentment towards someone.
Right.
So it's a tricky game if you look at the details of it. But if you do as I do, I mean, you go into the center of your being, connect and align to your higher self, you will see that there is nothing that you are not able to handle. There is no image that needs to be polished because when you are in that space of, stillness and life force, you also know that nothing you do can be a disappointment.
Right. Right. Right.
So it's a question of understanding what a boundary is.
Mm,
When I start saying no, the other question that pops up in my head is, how do I know what a real boundary is? What's a legitimate boundary? Like, how do I know what it is? Am I just being lazy and saying no? Or is this really something that is important to me and I need to set a boundary here? How do I know? It's a
mm,
tricky one. It really is because you have to understand what a boundary is to begin with.
right. Right.
And for me, the simplest explanation or definition of what a boundary is to understand a boundary is where I end and outer reality begins.
Mm,
It's not written in stone because it's shifting. I am a living being, which means that I am interacting with the outer world. So this boundary is going to move as I move in
right.
this world. The more I know of myself, the more this boundary becomes defined, but not as a wall,
Mm,
as something that is transparent and allows interaction.
yeah. Right.
The more I know who I am, the less I know who I truly am, the more my ego is allowed to, you know, drive, the more it becomes a wall, the boundary,
Mm,
and it becomes hard to navigate through a wall.
yeah. it's interesting too, where energetically we can set this perimeter, meaning when we don't set boundaries, it's often because we don't feel safe enough to say no and we have this fear. But when we
Yeah.
find that center and then put an energetic perimeter around ourselves of how I want people to approach and enter my space, we'll more easily than verbally be able to set boundaries. But when we forget to
Mm,
set the energetic perimeter of
mm,
how, someone should interact with me and how I'm going to interact with them, then it
mm,
allows those that are not on the same frequency or not on the same intention of goodness,
mm,
kindness,
mhm,
but are looking to take from us something. That's when we feel like our boundaries get crossed or so, and
yes.
but we're not aware of our boundaries getting crossed until
Mm,
it happens versus being intentional and setting that out.
mm,
And I think it all stems from a lack of, like you're saying, awareness, but also a fear of what does this mean if I actually expand myself out and consciously understand where my energetic field ends. And it could be very
mm,
big. If we feel unsafe, we can have a very vast parameter. If
mm,
if we're just a normal living, maybe they say 6 feet, our energetic field is 6 feet, which is during COVID, they wanted to keep us 6 feet apart from each other. So we wouldn't
mm,
have that interaction energetically.
mm,
Maybe that's our natural perimeter. But either way, when we can set that energetically, it will help us more easily set it verbally with others.
mm. Yeah, sitting in a meditation, it's easy to feel or to push the boundaries
Mm.
until it encompasses the entire universe. I did this as a very young girl. I was 11 years old when I did the first meditation, even though I did not know that it was a meditation. I
Mm.
was pondering upon how vast the universe was. And I was thinking, if I can imagine the outer rim of the universe, I will be able to get an answer. And
Mm.
it felt like I was expanding my own boundaries until there was nowhere else to expand them, that I reached the outer rim of it. And it feels like you encompass everything is within you when you can do that. That is when you understand where your true boundaries are.
Mm.
Like on a spiritual level, your boundaries encapsulate everything that is living here.
Right.
But on a physical level, it's more of, like you say, 6 feet maybe, because
Yeah.
that's the energetic, or on a higher level, that would be a little bit more, but still,
Right.
those are the boundaries. The boundaries that we are aware of as a human being would be the skin.
Mm.
When that is breached, we know that someone really hurt us
Yes.
physically because
Yeah.
it touched our skin. So that's the skin being a boundary. And it's easy to see where that is. But if you come from circumstances where you were abused
Yeah.
physically, then that's the outer perimeter, which cannot be breached, because if it's breached and you don't care of it, you die.
Right.
Physically, you die. And if you've been abused physically, like someone hurt you physically, then you will be very aware of that boundary, and you will be in a fear state of mind, which will not allow you to expand in your spiritual boundaries,
That's right.
or they are there, but you are not allowed to explore them because there's fear. You have to keep yourself together. Physically in this world, you have to keep yourself together. So that's the fear. If you let go of that, then where are you? You might die. It's existential almost. So
Yes.
that's why you stay in this fear, in this stagnated state of being, and you're not able to explore your boundaries. This is why anyone can walk over your grounds,
Mm.
because your boundaries are, I can't say that they're close to your core, because they're not. They're illusionary, and it's like a wall around your core that doesn't allow the core, the soul, to explore reality here.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'll
Painful.
say this, incredibly painful. I'll say this morning in preparation for this. I'm like, well, there's so much I want to say about boundaries. And one of the things I think I've shared in a previous live, might have been a few years ago, but when I started this my healing journey in 2016, um, I went on this walk and I didn't know where I was walking, and I was almost in a altered state. I mean, it was a very interesting place to be in. But I was walking to um, find the end of this thought that I was having. And so while I was walking and my whole world was falling apart, the identity of my family, the identity of myself, the
Mhm.
identity of who I was and what I was, and
Mhm.
coming to grips with all that had happened, I had this image of myself as a golden retriever dog, and I would
I remember,
remember I've
yeah.
shared this,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I'd get on my belly when another dog
Hmm.
approached, and the
Hmm.
dog would bite me. And
Hmm.
I saw myself, instead of flinch back or show healthy aggression, which is a term that I learned after this experience, I would dig myself deeper into the ground, almost trying to flatten myself out to show, why would you do that to me? I would never do this to you. I'm not a threat to you. And I would get bit again.
Mm.
And it really disturbed me. And I saw myself of how I had operated for so long without any boundaries at all, and
Mhm.
trying to nice my way through this
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And it would only cause more anxiety, more frustration in myself, because if I really said what I wanted to say, what would that mean? How would that change my life?
Mm.
And thinking this morning on my walk and prep of this live, I wonder how many people, not necessarily because they feel like they're a dog digging themselves into the ground, but how many
Mhm.
people feel a fear to really say what they want to say because of some retribution or some retaliation or some pain associated with their
Mm.
verbalizing themselves. And
Mm.
if they're like me, I'd imagine there's many out there
Yeah.
that feel afraid to
Mm.
speak up because pain might be
Mhm.
on the other side of that.
Yeah, and again, it's a conditioned way of being because a
Right,
child isn't born that way.
right,
If it were born that way, it wouldn't cry when it needs food.
right.
It wouldn't wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning because it will think, I can't wake mom up 2 o'clock. She'll be tired, so I won't do that. No, it does not do that. It's instinctive. It comes with the baby, so to speak. It's an energy that is there because it's survival. So you
Yeah.
need to set a boundary. You need to tell. For me, a boundary is not just to say no to what others wants from me. It's also to understand what I need and
Mm,
want and desire in this reality. So most people would say setting boundaries has to do with saying no to other people. For me, setting boundaries might be to say yes to something that I need.
right.
And that's really important, because if you're afraid to say no then to others, then you're as afraid to say yes to yourself. And if you
Mm,
do that enough times, you don't know what you want in this world.
yeah.
And that means that you have no boundaries of where you end and the outer world begins
Mm,
because you haven't defined what you like, want, desire, daydream of. Maybe you've defined what you're afraid of, what you don't want, and that becomes your boundaries. But then you're operating from a place of not wanting, from a place of a fear-based perspective.
right. Right.
So learning what is it that I want and communicating directly, honestly, and gently will get me the reality that I want to live in, and also put a boundary where it's meant to be.
Mm,
So just saying yes to yourself without feeling the guilt. Now, guilt is a big, big, big thing.
yeah.
I remember the first time that I felt that I said something that my mother didn't like, which was a part of my personality as a child.
Mm,
I think I was three, maybe 3.5 years old. I spoke very early, so I could speak a lot when I was 3 years old. And I just had a little brother, my middle brother. He was newly born, maybe a couple of months old. And I came to visit my mother from Serbia. I came to visit her here in Sweden. And I did not have the greatest communication with her because I didn't feel like she was my mother. She felt like a lady with beautiful hair, and that's all. Smelled good, but I didn't know who she was. That
Mm.
was my impression of my mother. And I was playing around, and she said, and it was the way she said it. I have this memory of this. She said, "Go and fetch a diaper."
Mm.
And I just looked at her and I answered. Now, this is very far away from who I am today, but this is what
Yes.
I answered. I said, "I am not your slave. Go and fetch it yourself." And she got so angry at me. She just
Oh,
dropped everything she was doing, picked me up, and she hit me on my button.
yeah.
Not hard, but she did hit me. And then she shook me like this and looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You do as you're told." And
Mm.
I remember how I shrunk within me. It was almost like forgetting all the past lives of being a queen and,
Yeah.
ruling the world. I
Yeah.
don't know if
Yeah.
I was
Right.
a
Right.
queen, but
Right.
that's
Yes.
how it felt
Exactly.
as a child.
Yes.
I just shrunk and I realized that her boundaries are here and I cannot cross those boundaries because it's a question of survival. As a child, you need to do what you're told, otherwise you can't survive. And you know that it's instinctive.
Yeah.
So that thing I remembered very well. And then when I go back to this, I'm thinking, where did that come from? Because I don't feel my boundaries the same way as I did as a 3.5-year-old girl. Now
Mm.
it came from somewhere,
Yeah. Right.
and I need to find back to that place and remember how it feels to have your boundaries there and that they're a natural part of who you are. Now,
Mm.
when I look at my relationship to my son, this is what he has taught me to remember where my boundaries are and to communicate them in a clear way.
Mm.
So he's reminding me of that boundaries are really important because I give everything. When it comes to my son, I would do anything for him. And he says, "You cannot do that because that is not love, that is fear."
Mm.
And that is the truth. It is fear. You
Yeah.
have to be able to express where your boundaries are, because when you do that, then you release the other from responsibility for your happiness.
Mm.
Because when you know where your boundaries are, you also know what will make you happy, and you're not outsourcing that to someone else.
Right.
So it becomes a more soul to soul connection.
Mm. That's
That
good.
is what he has taught me to understand, that boundaries are not just saying no. Boundaries are actually saying yes to yourself
Mm.
without hurting anyone. If
Yeah.
someone feels hurt because you need to take care of yourself, then maybe they need to look at their boundaries and their needs more. You
Mm.
can't take responsibility for others.
Right.
Not you can take responsibility. If you have a child, you have a responsibility to help that child, but you can't take responsibility for how others will perceive you.
Mm.
If you are authentic and honest with your, needs, then it's up to them how they perceive it. If you have a hidden agenda, then it becomes much more complicated. But if you, and this is where the power is, you can control if this comes from an authentic place or not. That is where it starts. The boundary setting starts with you. Does this come from an authentic place?
Mm.
Is it a real need? Why do I need this? Well, I'm tired. I need to sleep. I'll give you another example. Yesterday, my son called and he said, "Mom, can you come over? I'm going to clean my house and you can come over and help me clean my house." And I'm like, "No, I can't because I have a Sunday live." And then after that, I was thinking, oh my God, I said no to my son. Maybe he needs help. And it was this ruminating, guilt ripping myself for this.
Mm.
And I'm doing it all by myself because he got an honest answer and that was okay for him.
Right.
It's me, it's here. This is
Mm.
where the boundary setting and the exploration of what boundaries are starts here,
Mm.
always.
Right. I wrote a post yesterday that in anticipation to this, and it's just exactly what you're saying. I said, do not compromise your integrity for someone else's perception of you.
Yes, 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 yes.
And that's so much when we don't say no, honestly, from
Mhm,
ourselves, it's we're compromising our own integrity for someone else's perception of us. What are they,
mm,
are we not going to be perceived as nice or kind or loving, or we don't care
mm,
about them, or whatever the perception might be? And that reminder to stay true to our course, true to ourselves.
mhm,
This is the greatest, I think, path that all our souls are here to experience, because we are one soul in this body incarnate. Yes, we are of the collective. Yes, it is all one, but to have our own unique experience, I think, in the fullness of
mm,
ourselves is the point of being here.
mm,
Not to go return back to source and be like, well, I shared my experience more with this. I took someone else's experience, or I took someone else's intention for my time here. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is to fully express our own intention here and return
mm,
back and say, this is what I was able to create, to see,
mm,
bring forth,
mm,
bring back from my time,
mm.
versus, well, what did you do with your time? I just did what others wanted me to do. I just, completely submitted to others'
Mm.
expectations. And that's missing the mark.
Yes, absolutely. It's a question of owning your own experiences here. And if you're always fulfilling other people's expectations of you, you don't own your experiences here.
Mm,
Your experiences are always connected to someone else's desires, needs, wants, whatever it is. And that deprives you of energy because you're not meant to explore the world this way. It's an option here, spiritually speaking. It is an option.
mm,
And you're supposed to recognize it as that. Maybe explore it if you need, want, don't understand better. But as soon as you start understanding better, it's your job to call it, say what it is, and then
mm.
shift. What do I want
Yeah.
without the ego being the driver, asking yourself, what is it that my soul desires here? What is my purpose here? What is it that I'm here to explore? Sometimes it feels almost dangerous to talk about purpose because people back out when you start talking about purpose. It's such a big thing. Like, what's my purpose here? And it's always connected to some kind of material success in our society.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your purpose might not be at all connected to that. Your purpose
Mm,
might actually be to become aware of where your ego is driving and where your soul is driving. It might be of a totally different essence than you think that it is. And it
yeah.
might seem like a small thing seen from the outside, but a really big thing, spiritually speaking, for you on the inside.
Mm,
You can't measure that. It's impossible to measure that. So your purpose might be something totally different. I know that my purpose here is connected to understanding this reality as the best way I can understand it. And then my ego comes in play because it likes to share with others. So my
mm,
soul is looking for understanding how this reality works through a physical lens.
mm,
And then my ego takes over and says, let's share this with others because it gives you pleasure to be seen. And
mm.
that is okay for me as long as I know that this is what it is. My
Yeah.
life does not depend on being seen, but it gives me
Right.
great joy to do so. So under that might be a purpose, and that is connected also to boundaries, because if I allow ego to drive me, I'll do anything to be seen, and
Mm,
I don't. I will not do that.
right.
So it's a balance, understanding what your ego wants. I know that I talk a lot about ego, but for me, the ego holds the boundaries.
Mm,
Because the soul comes into this world and it cannot perceive this world without the five senses
yeah.
and ego that holds them together. Because in your ego is your identity here.
Mm,
Your identity is soul. Your true identity is soul, and
Yes.
everybody's true identity is soul, light, love, all of that. But when it descends down into a physical body, the ego becomes the container of what the soul wants to explore in this specific case, and in this specific case, and in all specific cases on earth. So all my desires, needs, wants are contained in my ego,
Mm.
but also all my fears and all my worries and all my phobias and obsessions and everything are also contained by the ego. So
Mm.
the ego separates you from all that is, which means that the ego sets the boundaries.
Mm.
So you have to find, like, if you are, say
Yeah.
that you come again from an abused uh, family,
Yeah.
your ego will say you can't set boundaries because that's mean.
Mm.
If you're a kind person, you don't set boundaries. If you're a kind person, you can't set boundaries. So your kindness becomes almost an obstacle in the physical world because it won't allow you to set, good boundaries for yourself. And
Mm.
here's how it works, because the ego contains your shadow, but also your light. And
Yeah.
you have to find the balance between the shadow and the light to set the boundaries so that it is balanced within you. The shadow will tell you where you need to work on yourself
Mm.
so that the light might lead you in growth. The shadow will want you to stay, to be in status quo, to not change, because ego does not like to change. But there is a growth aspect in ego also. It wants you to grow. It gives you joy and pleasure to be seen, as
Yeah.
I told. So you have to find a way to balance these two. And that is the work that is need to be done in this world so that you will understand where your boundaries are and where others begin, so to
Mm.
speak. So it's connected to ego. And since it is ego, we're afraid. If you are a spiritual person, you would say, but I can't let ego drive me because that's not good. If you want to know your identity in the physical world, you need to speak to your ego.
Yeah. Yes.
Ask, what is my desires? What is it that I want? The first thing you get a no to as a child is some desire that is not approved by your parents, but it comes from your ego.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where you learn. Oh, okay, not this. That's where the bound. But you learn where their boundaries are, not where your boundaries are.
Right. Yeah, it's this interesting journey of reclaiming truth in undoing all
Yes, yes,
all that's been given to us and
yes.
presented to us. While you were speaking, I had this image
Sorry.
of this glass of water, and if the glass of
Mhm.
water is us coming into the world clear, yes, exactly like that. And if we
Yes.
come into the world like that, and our soul
Mhm.
is the water and the ego is the
Mhm.
container,
Mhm.
it's like our parents and people
Mhm.
spray paint on the outside
Yes.
constantly, just spray paint,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
the point where it becomes opaque and you can't see through
Yes.
the container.
Yes.
And it's our job to scrape or
Yes.
move slowly so we can start to look again outside
Mhm.
of or through the
Mhm.
ego and not
Mhm.
just realize that the ego is all there is, but the ego is a mechanism for
Mhm.
exploration.
Without a doubt, Lucas, I've been talking about the glass and the soul and
Yes.
ego as this for years. And when I pick that up and I say, if you look at this glass, this these are the boundaries, it contains your soul.
Yes.
And if you take care of your ego, meaning looking for what is it that I want in this world without hurting others, this is important because if you start hurting others, this will not be as transparent.
Exactly.
So looking at what is it that I want, your soul will be able to see through ego and explore this reality. But
Mm.
if you don't know your boundaries, if you don't know what you want and what you don't want in your reality, it becomes dirty.
Yes. Yes.
and you can't see through. Soul cannot see through, and that's a very lonely place to be in, because you cannot see the others. You can't see the reality as it is. You will only perceive it what ego allows you to perceive, and it's a very, very painful place.
Right.
There is a thing called peak experiences, which means that when you are present, say that you're looking at a sunset and you're present in it, and you can really feel the majestic frequency that a sunset gives you. If you are in a place where you don't know how to set the boundaries, if you are always driven by others, you will not be able to perceive the fullness of this sunset,
Hmm.
because you are occupied with the world outside, what others need of you, the image of you. You are not present, fully present, to be able to have a peak experience. And it's funny because my son sent back to me yesterday an image of the sunset, and it was amazing. It's very close
Wow.
to where he lives. It's at the sea, very close to the sea. So he was out there walking and he took a picture, and it was amazing, so amazing. And I'm thinking he had a peak experience there. He was alone and he had a peak experience there. And I haven't heard him say this because he's always been with us. And we're together, we're watching, seeing things, and he's connected to us. He knows my boundaries, I know his boundaries. This was a solitary thing. He was out there and he had a peak experience of the sunset. And I'm thinking this is a good sign, because he was present in his body, and he sets the boundaries around him in a healthy way.
Hmm.
And it makes me proud as a mother to know that he's doing this regardless of if I'm there or not. He's doing it because of him, not because of someone else. But I found this interesting because the peak experience is an important thing if you want to stay happy in this life. You can
Hmm.
have a peak experience if you look, in a puddle of water, and you can see a poet has to be able to have peak experiences of everything. A writer,
Hmm.
but that means you have to be present in yourself and know where you end and
Yeah.
the outer reality begins.
Yes, that's right. That's such a it's a beautiful concept, especially the sunset being this peak experience of expression
Yes.
of, the self-exploration that he's getting to do.
Yeah.
And speaking of children or, your son,
Mm.
Mahmoud asked if parents teach children with their own boundaries, how to get over it when the child wants something that may oppose hurt or impose hurt in the future for him. So if a parent is the one that sets the boundaries that are not the child's, how does the child know what will hurt them and not hurt them in the future? I guess how do
Again,
we I think the question is, yeah, how to get over it when the child wants something that may oppose hurt in the future for him. That's what he's asking.
yeah, well, if a no to a child comes from an authentic and honest place within you, something that you know, and it comes from a loving space,
Mm,
then that child might not like it at that moment, but they will recognize it as the truth later on. I'll give you an example again with my son when he was around 3 years old. We were at the store. He wanted something, and I said, "No, you can't have it," because it was sugary, and it wasn't good for him. And I
yeah,
knew that I didn't want him to have it. And for the first time in his life, he just threw himself on the floor and he started screaming. And he was not himself, really. I know that he was tired, but that doesn't matter. So
yeah,
I had to leave all the groceries. I picked him up, put him in the stroller, and we went home. And he was screaming all the way home. This was horrible for me because we never communicated this way
yeah,
before.
yeah,
And when we got home, I took him out of the stroller, put him on the floor, and I went down on my knees to speak to him because I wanted to have eye contact with him. And he just put his hand up like this, and like he wanted to hurt me. And I took his hand,
mm,
held it, and looked him straight in the eye, and I said, "No." in this family, we do not hurt each other like this.
Mm.
No. And so he pulled his arm and then he started running through the hallway into the bedroom. And that's where and while he was running, he screamed, Hubert hates mom. And then he went into to our bedroom, and that's where he sat down. And I was like, oh my God. So I
Right.
went there and I sat with him, and he was very, very upset, but at the same time, he knew how to soothe himself, which is one of the things that is very special with Hubert. He knew how to soothe himself. And I was sitting there by him, put my arm around him. He put his head on my shoulder. And then he said, Hubert doesn't hate mom. And I say, I know, I understand that, but we don't hurt each other in this family. And
Mm.
that's how we got together again. He has never, ever done anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think that that was a good thing to say no to him.
Mm.
So some no's are really important to say, but
Yeah.
they have to come from some sort of truth, not a belief that you were taught by your parents.
Right. Right.
Something that comes from you and that is connected to truth. But it has to also have respect for the child and its autonomy and its integrity and its free will. So you can't push a child into a corner and say no to it and not explain why you're saying no to it. And then you have to be ready to meet the child again. It's as a parent, it's your responsibility that the
Mm.
communication between you and your child is functioning properly. So
Mm.
even if the child is angry, it is, and you are right, the child is angry, you still have to go there and, start communicating again, because the child has to learn how to pick up a communication again with you.
That's so good. Yeah.
As simple as that. So it's a question of being brutally honest, asking yourself, why am I doing this? I remember once being very stressed out, and I was on a bicycle, and Hubert was on the back sitting there, and we were late, and he was wanting something, and I was like, you can't have that now, blah, 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 screaming while I was driving
Yeah.
this, bicycle. And he's sitting there and he says, why are you screaming? And I stopped and I thought, why the heck am I screaming? I don't
Mm.
have to scream. It
Yeah.
was something habitual. And I wasn't screaming at him. I was just
Yeah.
irritated at everything. And he was like, why are you screaming? Asking yourself, why am I doing this? Is it important? Do I have to do this? Is it real? Is it true? Does it come from a loving place? Is
Right.
it really harmful? Is it something that I believe? Have to go through all that. It's a maze. And you will know when to say no for real and when not to say no.
Hmm. It's just such a fascinating, it seems so simple,
Mm-hmm.
right? The concept of boundary, the concept of no, the concept
Yeah.
of, I mean, it's such a simple concept, and yet many people around the world struggle with it. And
Mm.
it's tied to an authority narrative or an authority figure. It's tied to always someone that is perceived there's a power dynamic. And it's
Yes.
very interesting, this power dynamic, because I think we feel safest when we feel our own self power.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeking
Yes.
to find where that is. But
Mm-hmm.
then what a person that has a perceived greater sense of power comes into our place, it only reinforces that we are not powerful, as opposed to stepping in, finding the power, expressing the power of no in love.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
it is a very simple concept, but
Mm.
also very uh, sticky to sometimes pull apart to see the truth in it.
Yeah, it's sticky because we are full of triggers.
Hmm.
This is why it's sticky.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you say no, is it a trigger within you that said no, or is it really something that comes from this authentic place that I'm talking about? So
Mm.
this is why everything I do has to do with know who you are. And you said it's tied to a figure of authority.
Yeah.
Well, when we're born in this world, we are not the figure of authority ourselves. We have a parent that is a figure of authority. Now, that parent can abuse this knowingly or not knowingly. So, our job when we grow up is to relocate the figure of authority from the outside in.
Mm,
So, the figure of authority has to be here.
right. Right.
And when it's here, then you know, and your no will always be loving.
Mm,
It will always be tied to kindness, kindness, not just towards others, but kindness towards yourself, like some kind of self, um, I can't find the right word here, but taking care of yourself, because if you do not exist, then nothing else exists here.
mm,
It's it's important to take care of yourself. And here's where anger comes in. If you're not able to take care of yourself, you will put the blame on everybody around you because you feel like they're taking advantage of you. But that is just a signal that your boundaries are
yeah.
very weak, that they're perforated, that if you say no, then it's a no, a loving no, and
Yeah.
no one can take anything away from you if you say no.
Right. There's also a readjustment period with those.
Yes.
We'll probably lose many people that don't love us for who
Yes.
we are when we start
Yes.
using our boundaries. And I'll use a good example. For so many years, I was seeking a father figure in my life, and I would look for these men to fill this role that I did not have in my life. Well, up until I met this man, he talked a big game, how much he loved me and mentored me and all these things. So I started doing free work for his business,
Mm.
and I would do it often, and I thought I would get paid down the road for this work until it finally got to the point he'd asked so many times for things. And I said, this was only 2 years ago. I said, I can't do any more work unless I'm paid. And it doesn't have to be a lot, just be a couple $100s, but I need some sort of exchange. And he
Mhm.
stopped talking to me. And I was like,
Mm.
wow.
Mm.
And that was a signal. And I had to look at every person in my life. Who else have I allowed? I keep doing things for others, like that dog on its back,
Yes.
digging into the
Yes.
ground. And the
Yes.
minute I didn't say anything like, oh, you got to pay me a lot, just a little bit, it removed certain people out of my life.
Mhm.
And that will happen, I think, with every person who is still
Yes.
in the process of practicing their boundaries
Mhm.
and practicing the articulation of their no. No, thank
Mhm.
you. We teach our kids in this
Mhm.
house, no, thank you. So
Mhm.
Millie, 2.5-year-old, no, thank you, will hear that all the
Oh,
time. And it's the cutest little thing.
that's a good thing to say
It
no
is.
when you're two
Yeah.
and a half years old, to be able
Yeah.
to say no when you don't want
Yes.
anything.
That's
You
right.
know, it's almost like assertiveness training. You have to train
Mm.
yourself to be assertive, to become uh it's a question of value, to see your value, to understand why you are doing certain things. If you
Yeah.
are angry at someone because you feel that they're using you, this is a signal that your boundaries are not, that there's something with the boundary setting within you. You need to set another boundary. Now, there's this fear. If I set this boundary, then people won't like me, they'll leave. Here's the thing, if they leave, they weren't your friends.
Mm.
They weren't your friends and they're not vibing in the same frequency, or they're not vibing in the frequency where you are going. Now,
Yeah.
that might feel lonely. You lose a lot of friends
Right.
if they can't use you anymore. There is no need for anger in any of this.
Mm.
Anger is a signal that there is something you need to look at and change within you. When you change that, these people just disappear.
Yes. Yes.
They
Yes.
disappear. You don't even have to do anything. I can't even tell you how many friends that has disappeared from my life, which is great because I don't have to play the games anymore.
Right.
I don't have to play those games. I can be myself everywhere and I can train myself to setting boundaries because I have people around me who understand what a boundary is and that don't take it personally when I say no to something
Mm,
because they know who I am.
right.
And these are the people you actually want in your life. The other ones are just draining you of energy anyway. But there is this fear that comes from our childhood that I might be left alone, and that's life-threatening.
Yes.
This is existential. If nobody likes me, then who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. The sense of abandonment, the sense of,
Yes,
yeah, isolation, loneliness,
yes.
which ultimately comes back to this core of fear. And this is where trust and this is where
Mm,
vulnerability and this is where courage comes into play that
mm.
it's impossible for us to be truly alone because we are one with
Yes, everything.
everything. We
Yes.
are one with everything.
Hmm.
And I joked around at the table last night at dinner. My kids are like, Dad, you're looking old. You're getting wrinkles in your eyes and you're getting wrinkles and you got the gray, you're getting gray in your beard.
Hmm.
And I was like, and I always tell them, I'm going to live a long, long life. I'm just getting started. That's what I always tell them. I'm just getting
Hmm.
started. And I was like, but if I do go, I think I'm going to come back as a tree. And my daughter Claire laughed so hard. No one really got it except my daughter Claire. She laughed so hard, and we laughed together, just like it's all good. Like I think I've had a lot of experiences in this life, both amazing
Hmm.
and incredibly painful. I think if I come back, I'll just come back as a tree. just just be
Yeah.
there in one. And I joke around is that we are part of this oneness. We are
Hmm.
never truly alone.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
ego, when it has the spray paint on the outside and we
Mm.
forget, it can
Mm.
feel alone and it can be very fearful of abandonment and isolation,
Mm.
loneliness.
Mm.
But it takes the soul encouraged to explore themselves here.
Absolutely. Courage is one of those words. You have to trust and you have to have courage if you want to set, you know, real boundaries. You can't live a life without boundaries.
Right, right,
I
right,
think there is this, when we talk it in the spiritual community, people talk about, well, I am one with everything. That feels like there are no boundaries.
right.
Yes, you are one with everything because you contain everything.
Mm,
Containing something, well, there has to be boundaries.
mm,
Otherwise, you can't contain it.
yeah, yeah.
So you're a container of your soul here, and the container has boundaries. How do you take care of that container?
Mm,
Because you really have to ask yourself, what is it that I want? Why do I want it? And then gently saying yes to it and no to those who are not aligned with that.
right, right.
But again, I have to really stress this. It's the gentle, loving no, but very firm.
Yes,
So
yes.
firm, gentle, and loving.
Mm,
Firm, gentle, and loving, and standing still, allowing the other person to become disappointed or, feel angry or whatever it is. Because as we say, if they're your friends and if they know you and if they know that this came from a place of love, then they'll stay. They won't go.
right.
There
That's
is no threat in this.
mm.
There's
Mahmoud,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say Mahmoud had he said when you explained what it for the child dynamic and the truth. He said that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly his point. Thank you. And then he goes, Lucas, I met the same person who made me do work for him, and I waited to be paid. Later on, I knew his ugly truth and understand what you feel. And when I said no, he stopped talking. Um, so there are many of us in this life that we're
Mm-hmm.
exploring, and we all
Mm-hmm.
want to. I think in the core, we all want to be loved. That's what we want.
Yes.
We want to be loved.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful truth and that's a beautiful
Mm.
desire. But when we outsource loving ourselves through other beings to
Yes.
project. That's why we can't compromise our integrity for someone else's perception
Mm,
of us, because their
mm,
perception will never be the truth. It will be filtered through their ego of
mm.
us. And when we can remember, you said firmness, what were the three?
Firm, gently, and
Yes.
loving.
Yes. FGL. Firm.
Yes, it has to come from a loving place.
That's
You
right.
know,
Hmm.
if we are kind and um, we do anything to be loved,
Hmm.
accepted, then there's this risk of losing a sense of self. And you're always focused on other people. That's a very, very, very painful place to be in if you're always focused on other people. Now, if you have children, you have to be focused on them, but that's kind of joyous to do so. But if you're focused on how other people perceive you and fitting into that, the more of a rebel you were when you were born, the more pain you will experience when you start trying to fit into other people's version of you.
Hmm.
I know this because of the story that I told you when I tell my mother, I'm not your slave, go and get your
Yeah.
diaper yourself.
Right.
Like, it is a long way between that and doing everything to be seen and loved and accepted and be the good girl and do what
Hmm.
everyone asks you of doing, cleaning the house when I'm 8 years
Yeah.
old just to be seen, doing all these things. There's a long way between that and that. And there is pain because this is as much of a part of my personality as this is. So I
Hmm.
need to bring it here. And that's how I become authentic and being able to say no gently, lovingly,
Hmm.
but firmly. Firmly comes from, I'm not your slave.
Right.
Gently comes from, I'll do anything for you because I love you.
Right. 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 That's beautiful. I see.
Is it, Millie?
That's what I'm telling you. You want to come say hi?
Oh.
Um, say hi.
Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Millie.
Can you say hi?
Hi. Oh, she's so beautiful.
I love you. Okay, come on. Love you.
Ah.
Um, she's a character. She busted in earlier today. Man, you got it.
Breaking boundaries.
Yes,
That's what she's doing. Breaking
exactly right.
boundaries. Oh, there's a door here. I'll walk
Yeah,
in.
exactly. Exactly. This
Yeah.
has been so beautiful. And I think we're all on this journey. There's
Yes.
no arrival. We can always get better, but just framing this up, I think, was so important. It's important for me. It's important, I
Mm,
know, for others. Mahmood, Suresh was watching,
mm,
Terrell was
mm,
on.
mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, the important thing is to understand that boundaries are not just saying no. Boundaries are saying yes to yourself, remembering how to do this, and trusting that the people that really love you, the people that really understand you, if your no comes from a loving place, they will stay. The other ones you don't need anyway. So that can loosen up the fear a little bit to make you less fearful. If you can explain to the people that you love, say that you have problems with saying no to your spouse, to your partner,
Yeah.
if you talk to them and say, this is important for me, and it comes from a loving place, not trying to guilt trip them,
Mm,
not trying to outsource your happiness on them, instead saying, this will make me happy, and allowing yourself to be the driver and the one that gives you happiness can
mm,
free them from the responsibility, which makes life much, much more easier. So your job will be to ask yourself, what is it that I want in my life?
mm,
Not outsource it. I want this person to do this for me because that will backfire on you. What is it that I want? What kind of experiences do I want here? Really focusing on your needs,
yeah.
not what you want from other people, your needs.
Mm,
your wants and your desires. And that's how you start vibing on a higher frequency, because you become the driver, you become where the power originates. And
Mm,
that is the truth. It originates here. Even if you feel totally powerless, it's still here. It originates here. And
mm,
then the boundaries are easy to put there because you're not afraid. You're vibing on a frequency which will allow you to put boundaries there.
mm, it's beautiful.
What did we say?
Ah,
Firm,
firm,
gently,
gentle,
and
love.
loving.
Yes.
Yes,
Firm,
firm, but
FGL.
gentle.
Yes.
Yes, firm, but gentle and loving way.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for this live and
Thank you.
Mahmoud, thank you for all your comments and being interactive. And
Thank you.
Suresh, always good to see you, brother. And
Yes.
Terrell was on, and um, these
Mm.
are, I think, just important. If nothing else, they're important for me to
Yeah.
have this conversation and
Yeah.
remember these.
Mm.
Because I love Ram Dass's quote, "We're all walking each other home," and it certainly feels like
Yes.
that many often that we're not alone in this journey. We share. I say this in my podcast that I share my journey so that you
Hmm.
don't feel alone in your journey. We're all in this together, learning and
Hmm.
growing. And there's so
Hmm.
many beautiful truths that we can share with one another.
Absolutely. Always from an authentic, loving place.
Yes, yes, yes.
Sharing from an authentic, loving place. This is what I feel like you and I are doing, because we are sharing our journeys
Yeah, yes,
and hoping that someone can recognize themselves in it and maybe even, you know, understand more about themselves if they see that it's the same struggle within each and every one of us. We all have the same struggle. It's a question of how to balance yourself and understanding that you're not alone in this struggle. We're all doing it.
right, right. It's
Mm.
good. That's good. Thank you. Thanks
Yes.
for another great Sunday Live.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice week.
All right.